Hey everyone, James Tyler Robertson here, and got a bit of a crazy story I want to talk to you about today. Now I know what you're thinking. Most Bible stories usually start off kind of slow, and there's a lot of these and thous and thou shalt nots, and a big booming voice from the sky, and some bearded dude talking about something that makes no sense. And usually by the end of it, most of us end up like, what? And wipe the drool off, and here we go. We can also get the idea that this is what happens when we start following God, is that our life is going to be one big snoozeville where we're all like, don't do this, don't do that, no fun, no fun, no fun, it's against the Lord and whatnot. But that is not the case with the story we're looking at today. Today we're looking at a guy named Saul. Now you may not recognize the name Saul right off the bat, but his name's going to change, so hold tight. But right now, we got a guy named Saul and his crazy life story. So first off, Saul was he was a young guy, but he's recognized as being already really gifted in this sort of religious, smart group known as the Pharisees. And the Pharisees knew all the rules, but you know what? They weren't very fair, you see. It's a little joke. Anywho, so they were so into the rules. They loved the thous and the these and the thou shalt nots that on top of the 10 commandments, they actually added 613 other rules that they said was from God. I don't think I know 613 words, let alone 613 rules. I think that's how many bones you have in your body. Or it might just be your foot. I don't know. I'm not very good at stuff. I don't even know 600 words. Anywho. That's not true. I'm very smart. Anywho, so they had 613 rules, and they were just so concerned that everybody follow all the rules, because if they don't, then God's going to get mad. And Saul, who we're going to learn more about in a little bit, was one of their best, their brightest, their young, up-and-coming kind of guys. Now, Saul had a special ability. Not a great ability, but a special ability in that he especially hated those Jewish people that were following this guy named Yeshua. They were calling him the Mashiach, Yeshua ben Yosef, Yeshua of Nazareth. You might know him as Jesus. And see, for Saul, he thought these Jewish people following Jesus was absolutely the worst thing. This was breaking God's number one rule of follow God. And he believed that they were not following God. So he became really good at persecuting them. Now, the word persecution basically means, that's the G version of what I'm talking about. But he got a reputation for being one of those guys who was really good at making life very, very uncomfortable and very, very short for those people who followed Jesus. So as our story picks up today, he's riding a horse. He's riding a horse. That's the sound of riding a horse, to this place called Damascus. And on the way, pow, he gets struck blind and has a vision of Jesus in which Jesus asks him, Saul, why are you persecuting me? And, if Jesus shows up, blinds you, and then asks you a question, it's going to take you a little while to answer. But Saul freaks out and recognizes that what he's been doing all along has been totally wrong. So he's told to keep on going to Damascus and that God is going to help him further. But keep in mind, he's still blind. He's riding on a road in the countryside to a town totally blind. You know what it's like to be blind. Just close your eyes. See, isn't that incredible? You can't see a thing. Well, if you're not doing this, then all you're looking at is me with my eyes closed. So, you know what? To make it a little bit more interesting. Okay, so here I'm here. I'm just going to walk around with my eyes closed and see how well I do. Oh, come on! Oh. Not well. And I know this room. So he walks around and goes to this place. And there's this guy by the name of Ananias. Now, Ananias is one of those Jesus followers. And so Ananias is just doing his morning prayers, like I'm sure a lot of you do. Maybe some of you don't, but, whatever. He's talking to God as part of his routine. So he's sitting there, and just picture Ananias. So you're sitting there, you're doing your morning prayers. Dear Lord, thank you for my mom, thank you for my dad, help me pass that test. And all of a sudden you actually hear from God. And God's telling you, you need to go and share my gospel with someone. That's pretty cool. So you can imagine Ananias like, sweet, okay, Lord, whatever it is you'd have me do, I will go. Who should I go to? I'm sorry, what? I'm sorry, what? I think I'm having problems hearing. Are you talking about the Saul of Tarsus? But he goes. Full credit to Ananias, 100%. He goes and he talks to Saul about Jesus. And Saul believes. And Saul regains his sight. And Saul changes his name to Paul. Now that may seem silly, and that's not something that God requires. So if your name's like mine, James, all of a sudden I'm going to change my name to Jim? What rhymes with James? Anyhow, but in that world, at that time, names meant a lot. And it looks like Saul really wanted to turn over a new leaf, be somewhat born again, and to start on a whole new path, and he does that as Paul. So now Paul, I got to consult my script here. So Paul becomes a leader for Jesus. Paul becomes a leader for Jesus, and he travels all throughout the Roman Empire, which is huge. It'd be bigger than Canada, maybe about as big as Canada and America together, but a lot. If any of you have done any traveling, especially driving around Canada, maybe in the back seat while your parents listen to weird music and stuff like that, you kind of understand. Traveling, well, fun, not always great. So anywho, Paul is traveling all around the Roman Empire, and he starts to tell people about Jesus. Now, he knew he was going to go through some pretty rough times, and indeed he did. And his story gets even crazier now. But this is an important part for us to remember because it's part of your other lesson. Let's do that again. Now, Paul was going to go through some really difficult times, and indeed he did. But it's important for us to remember because it's part of your larger lesson. That lesson being, pause, and here we go. Following God's mission meant Paul would go through some really hard times. Pause. In order to explain this, Paul would write, and we gotta read about this now in the book of Acts. I'm going to read it for you right here. I am compelled or motivated by God's Spirit to go to Jerusalem. I don't know what will happen to me there, except that God's Spirit tells me in city after city I'm going to put in jail and suffer. Pretty brave guy. And it didn't stop him, and he just kept on going. He says again, but my life is worth nothing to me unless I complete the mission Jesus gave me, to tell others the good news about the amazing grace of God. And so Paul went to Jerusalem. And just like Jesus before him, some of the religious leaders there started to persecute him. But keep in mind, this was one of their golden boys. And now he's coming back talking about that exact message that they were all so opposed to. He'd done a 180. Side note, people always say he'd done a 360. That just puts you back to the right place, including what I just did with my finger. A 180 is half a circle, meaning you're facing the other direction. The more you know. Boom, 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 boom. None of you will know what that means. All right. So they kept putting Paul in prison. They kept going after him. Paul just would not give up. So one of those times when Paul's in prison, something special happened. And we find this in Acts chapter 23, verse 11. Sorry, I got to look down right now, but I want to read this to make sure I get it good for you. The following night, the Lord stood near Paul and said, "Take courage. As you have testified about me in Jerusalem, so you must also testify in Rome." Jesus appeared to Paul in prison and gave him a promise that God was going to help him travel to Rome. So how do you go about doing that? Well, it's important for us to know that Paul was a Roman citizen. His father before him, and he had inherited that. Now, that's important. Many of you will be Canadian citizens. Some of you will be citizens of other countries. But when you're the citizen of a country, it's like you're a member of a club. And as a member of a club, you get special privileges. For example, the group you're in right now gives you special privileges. I'm hoping most of them are sugar and sweet based and food and stuff like that. But also, like friendship, learning, all that stuff that actually matters but doesn't taste that good. So being a Roman citizen meant that you always had the right to a free trial. Other people did not. Not a free trial, a fair trial. Let's try that again. One of the perks of being a Roman citizen meant that you always had recourse to a fair trial. You always got a chance to defend your case. And this is what Paul does. So they make Paul go from one ruler, and he actually appeals to Caesar. Caesar's like the king. He also made a wonderful salad. So he appeals to Caesar to have his case heard in Rome so that the people in Jerusalem can't actually kill him. And everybody's kind of like, well, what's going on with that? But of course, Paul knows that it's his turn to go and speak in Rome. And this brings up another point we need to read about. Paul was traveling around, and he decided to stay with these prisoners, and he traveled with the prisoners because they had Roman guards, which would keep him safe from any of the guys who really didn't like him, who were crazy enough to actually just try and kill him themselves. But with guards around him, Roman guards, big guys with swords that do much damage. That's not a Roman accent at all, so just ignore that part. But you get the point. he would have these guards there protecting him and keeping him safe and making sure that he would get to Rome. Now, the other benefit is, and this is our next point, Paul didn't need to be in prison, but he wanted to serve Jesus, and so he accepted living with prisoners as part of the following the mission that God had given him. I'm going to read that again so I don't look so weird. This is an important part. Paul didn't need to be in prison, but he wanted to serve Jesus. And so he accepted living with prisoners. Now, living with prisoners can be tough. They're not always the nicest people. Some of them are there for the wrong reasons. Some of them are actually pretty cool people. But for the most part, it's a dangerous way to live. So Paul didn't need to live with the prisoners, but he saw that as part of following the mission that God had given him. So in order to get to Rome, hopefully somebody there is going to give you a map. Maybe there'll be something that will pop up here, but it's beyond my abilities to manifest. No map. All right. Anywho, to get from Jerusalem to Rome, see that space between my fingers? It's water. My face is water. We are mostly made up of water, so this is not totally inaccurate. So my face is the water. So here's Jerusalem, here's Rome, and basically Paul needs to take a boat from Jerusalem to Rome. And now I wish I wasn't using both my hands because it'd be kind of fun to have a boat go across my face. So he's going to take a boat there, and he had to travel this boat with prisoners as a prisoner. And he experienced what they experienced. He was living the life that they were living. And Paul's going to be famously known for saying, be all things to all people. And, he backed up what he said with what he did. So again, Paul didn't have to do this, but he thought this was how he could follow God. And so Paul sailed for Italy with some other prisoners. Across my face. We read in the book of Acts that they, quote, were handed over to a centurion named Julius, who belonged to the imperial regiment. They boarded a ship from Adramyttium. And if you want that spelled, forget it. And they're about to sail for ports along the coast of the province of Asia that they put out to sea. And then it keeps on explaining that. And if you do want to look at that word, it's Acts 27, verses 1 and 2. And something they didn't know that when they were sailing, they were headed for one of the worst nights of their life. It's something, I'm going to give you a clue. There's a whole major movie built about this sort of, not this event, but an event very similar to the event we're talking about. And the song from it was like, my heart will go on. I think we all regret that just happened. But that, my young friends, is a story for next time. It's just occurring to me, how many of you are actually old enough to get that reference? Probably not most. I am very old. Anywho, James Tyler Robertson here, signing out, and we'll see you for the adventures next time. And now I stop the video. Maybe you will cut this out. Maybe you will use this song because there's 2 songs in it. Yeah.